This is a little video just to highlight the things that you have to be able to do on the graphing calculator on the actual AP test. I just try to compact that all into one video so we don't have to keep doing that over and over again. And also, if you need a little refresher, you could just watch this video anytime you need there. And before we get started, my brother helped me cut down this tree at my house, this dead tree at my house this past summer. And he popped out of his truck and he goes, only thing better than one chainsaw is two chainsaws. And the dude just had a chainsaw on each one of his hands. And I thought that was a little unnecessary at the moment. But then in the middle of cutting down that dead tree, one of those chainsaws got stuck. And so we needed that second chainsaw to come from the other side and kind of get that thing unstuck there. So it was a necessary thing right there. So the reason I mention that is because since this is a video about graphing calculators, you know, the only thing better than one graphing calculator is two graphing calculators, man. We got two graphing calculators ready to go for this video. All right, so most of the stuff that we got to do on the calculator, we kind of highlight with this one problem right here. One thing we got to be able to do, we got to be able to graph, and we got to be able to get the thing to pop up and find the intersection points there. So I entered both of these equations into my graphing calculator already. They're in there. And then anytime a graph will have trig in there, like Zoom 6 is your normal viewing window, Zoom 7 is your trig viewing window. So whenever I have a trig in the problem, I'll hit Zoom 7 first, and it will graph that thing. And then sometimes, a lot of times, they'll give us a viewing window that we could change, and I could hit the window button, and I can change that to be my X min, X max. I'll show that in another problem here. This one, I'm trying to model the shape that they put on that paper for me because I need to find the intersection points here. So as I look at that graph, I mean, it looks like it's going to be right here. I need to zoom in on that area right there. So I just hit the zoom button, go down to number 2 where it says zoom in, or just type number 2 where it says zoom in. And it doesn't do anything right away, but it does bring you out. And if you see, it brings up this little cursor on your screen. Anywhere you put that cursor and hit enter on there, it'll like zoom in at that spot. So I'm gonna put my cursor right here. I'm gonna hit enter, and then hopefully get it to look a little bit more closely like what they got on the paper for me. All right, perfect. And all I got to do, I'm going to find the intersection point. So here's how we find intersection points. You hit the trace button first, and then I'm going to work on this guy right here. So you just got to put that cursor near the intersection point. As long as it's somewhere near there, you're going to be good. And then anytime you need to calculate intersection point 0, second trace is going to be our menu here. It's our calculate menu. So you're going to hit second trace, and then we want to find intersection points here. So I'm going to hit number 5. Now, intersection points are easier than finding zeros. What's about to go down is I'm going to simply hit enter 3 quick times in a row, and it's going to give me my intersection point. But let me just walk you through what it's actually doing. It says first curve question mark. There's our sign graph at the top there. I just hit enter on that. And then it says second curve question mark. It already switched it for us. So it's smart enough to realize, hey, if there's only 2 graphs in this thing, it's going to choose that other one right there. And so the second curve had already switched it for us. So I just hit enter, say, yeah, that's my second curve. And the guess, I never usually guess. I just hit enter a 3rd time. But the fact that we put that cursor over there and knows it's supposed to be getting that one right now rather than that other one right there. So I just hit enter a 3rd time. So you just hit second trace, hit number 5 where it says intersection points, hit enter 3 times, and then it gives you the X and the Y's at the bottom of that screen right there. And then you need to jot down both things. Now, it might turn out that you only need the X's or you only need the Y's, but you don't want to have to do that again. So you just write down your intersection point right away. Remember, we're going to round everything to 3 numbers after the decimal on this AP test right there. All right, and then so I'm going to show just the other one while we're at it. All right, I'm going to hit the trace button. I'm going to move my cursor over there. And then let's do that one more time. So I'm going to hit second, and I'm going to hit trace. I'm going to hit number 5 where it says intersection point. And let's just do it quickly here. Let's just hit enter 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then it gives me the 1, 0.25 right there. So then I have the intersection points there. So one thing, we got to be able to graph it. We could play around with that zoom in feature a little bit. And we've got to find those intersection points right there. And then as you're doing the Math 9, we work with the Math 9 quite a bit. I just want to mention on this problem there, you know, I kind of made a note for myself when I entered these into the calculator that this was my Y1. this is my Y2, because when the time comes to find an area, I got a whole nother video explaining how to do this problem, but the calculator part, I want to stress there, you don't have to type in this function minus this whole function and spend all that time typing that out right there. If you have the functions in the calculator already, there's my Y1, there's my Y2. So if I need to do G minus F, that's giving us this area, this top curve minus the bottom curve. If I'm done to do G minus F, that's my Y2 minus the Y1. So let me review how to access those. So I'm gonna hit second and I'm gonna quit. I should probably maybe clear that out at this point. When we do the math 9, all right, there's the math 9, and I'm going from 0 to the 0.178 on this guy. And instead of typing in the whole function again, I know I'm supposed to do the Y2 minus the Y1. So remember, second trace is to access that menu, to find the zeros, find the intersection points. Alpha trace is to access these shortcuts here. So if you hit alpha and then that trace button, there's all the stuff that you can access your Y2 and your Y1. This one I want to do Y2 first, and then minus, then I'll hit alpha trace, and then there's my Y1, and I just go over there and I just hit my variable button, and it'll do that math 9 for me, and it gives me that 0.065 number that we got right there. So that's just kind of a nice feature. If you have the functions graph utility calculator already, you're allowed to just have those in there, and then to use the Y2 and the Y1 feature, you can even write that as G minus F and F minus G instead of writing down the whole thing. You got to show your integral and you go show your setup there, but that's just a nice feature in order to access those shortcuts right there. Another really nice feature on the graphing calculator, if I ever have a really difficult equation to solve, and I have to like solve that, and I have no idea how to solve it, and I'm on the calculator part of the test, the graphing calculator will do that for you. So for example, there's a problem. This is another problem, but this is the equation that we're supposed to set equal to 0. So I just want to review how to do that in the calculator. If you ever have something difficult to solve, you're not meant to do all that stuff on your own there. It's gonna, even if you could do that algebraically, you're gonna take too long on that. So what you want to do in that instance, when you have a tough equation to solve, even if you have stuff over here, move everything to one side, set it equal to 0, graph this function right here, which I already have loaded into my second graphing calculator. So there's that function in there. All right, and then it has trig in there again. So I'm gonna hit zoom 7 just because it has trig involved. And I'm also gonna show how to change the viewing window on this particular graph as well, because this particular problem, now I know that it only crosses at one spot, but if it ever crosses at more than one spot, this problem says it only existed in between 0 and 6. So whenever they give us a domain like that and your graph is a little chaotic, you could just hit the window button and then you're going to go from 0 to 6. So make 0 your x min and then make the 6 your x max. So you could type in 0 to 2 pi a lot of times on the graphic calculator, like there's your pi button right there. So if I hit 0.6 now and then graph it, and then it looks like there's one spot where that graph crosses the x-axis right there. So here's how you find that 0. I'm gonna hit trace, hit the trace button first, get that cursor to pop up, and then move that closer to there. And if it's taking a little bit longer, you could just type in another number, maybe it'll speed that along, all right? Little transport thing there, all right? And then here's what we need to do. You're gonna put your cursor over there, and then it's still, anything you need is that calculate menu. You're gonna hit second, and you're gonna hit trace. And then this time we wanna find a 0. So I'm gonna hit number 2. And then this time you can't just hit enter 3 times like those intersection points. You have to center that. You gotta go to the left of that a little bit and to the right of that a little bit, and you gotta center that thing. So I'm gonna move it over to the left a little bit. On an increasing function, it'll be below the x-axis. On a decreasing function, it'll be above the x-axis. You gotta move to the left of that x-intercept a little bit there. And I'm gonna hit enter. And it says right bound question mark. So I have to move it to the right of that x-intercept. So on an increasing function, it's gonna be above the x-axis. On a decreasing function, it'll go below. So I'm gonna pay attention to those y variables, and I'm gonna move that, and I'm gonna make sure that y changes sign. And then boom, it moved on the other side of that x-axis. So then I can enter again. And then once you do that, I never guess. I just hit enter a 3rd time and then see how it tells us y is equal to 0. And my x value is that 5 equals 5, that x equals 5.118. And that's how the graphing calculator solved that equation for it. So if you ever need the x-intercept, that's how you do it. If you ever have a difficult equation to solve and you're on that calculator part of the test, you don't need to solve it, get everything on one side, set that thing equal to 0, and then graph it, and then let that find the intercepts right there. So we reviewed how the zoom function works. We got the graphing, we got the changing the viewing window for your X min, your X max, we got the zeros, we got the intersection points. One other really nice thing, you know how to use that Math 9. And then what I'm also going to review with you here is the Math 8 feature. So this is just another different, just a different problem. Notice this problem, they gave us the velocity, and they said, what's the acceleration at time t equals 2? So we know it goes position, velocity, acceleration, right? We know I could take a crazy product rule right there and then plug in the 2. That would be my acceleration there. But if you ever are supposed to take a derivative and they give us a number, Math 8 is what you want to do. So Math 9 is your definite integral. Math 8 is your derivative. So notice that if you just go down, like there's your finite integral, there's your derivative at a particular point right there, okay? But usually I'll just hit Math 8, and then this is what pops up on your screen. So you don't take the derivative. That's the whole point. You don't have to take the derivative, but I'm going to plug this whole function. So I'm just going to use x. It doesn't matter if they got t's or thetas in there, but I put my variable button in, and I'll type my function in. So I got my negative, parentheses x plus 1. And then we have the sine of the t squared. So I'm going to go x squared divided by 2. So close that. All right, and then if you scroll over, it tells you at x equals. So that's going to be, hey, find the acceleration at time t equals 2. That's the number you're evaluating that derivative at. And it will take that derivative for you and give you that answer right there. So Math 8 is nice for the integrals. We've been working with that. Math 8 is something kind of new for us. We can work with that now. And notice I gave us that 1.588 number that will round that to. And then a couple other things that I think we know, but just in case, if you ever have a fraction, you want to change it to a decimal, like we know 1/3 is 0.3 repeating, but if you ever have a decimal, you want to change it to a fraction, most of the stuff is in your math menu. So if you hit the math button, it's literally the very first one. It'll change it to a fraction for you. So boom, there you go. And then just hit enter on that, and it'll go to the 1/3. If you need the absolute value of something, everything's in that math menu, right? So if you hit the math button and you go over to number, that very first one is the absolute value bar. And then you could type in like -2, and it's going to give me that answer as a +2 right there. So if you have to graph an absolute value function, you can access it right there. If you ever need a factorial, hit the math button. You can go over the PRB, that's all your probability stuff. So if you guys take stats in college, there's your permutation combination button, but there's your factorial button right there. And then, you know, if you put the 5 in there first, and then you get your factorial, and then you're good there. All right, so we got the decimal to a fraction. Also, one other thing that just popped into my head that sometimes people ask, like, how do you get the fraction bar to pop up? Because a lot of times I don't even use the fraction bar. I'll just hit like 3 divided by 4, right? But if you wanted to, I believe it is alpha and then the y equals button. If I hit the alpha key first and then the y equals button, yeah, right there is n over d, and then you can get that to pop up. So I can do the 3/4, so I can do the 3/4 like that, you know, and it'll give you that. And then that's, you know, doing the fraction. So if you wanted to change that to the decimal, you can hit the math button. You can say, hey, change this to a decimal for me, and it'll give me back that 0.75. So you can use that also if you have to graph. Like if I want to graph that fraction right there, I can actually hit alpha y equals first and hit that. And then I could put in the 15x over the 1 plus 3x that way. And so that's kind of helpful sometimes. And then you're a little bit near, you could get that to show up on your screen here, right? So got any other questions there? We'll figure it out as we go along here. Chips and dip.